Hi, this is Joe Avati and welcome to Church Street Studios, my Sydney studio where I record my podcast, A Serious Chat with a Comedian. Well, today's guest is the lifestyle and food editor from the Toronto Sun in Canada. She's interviewed the best of the best in the food world. Close friend is Jamie Oliver. She's interviewed Stanley Tucci, Martha Stewart, and Anthony Bourdain. So all the way from Canada, she's waiting for us in Toronto. Let's go and talk to Rita De Montes. Well, Rita, thank you very much for joining me on my podcast. And I'm really excited today because normally you do the interviewing, you do the questioning, and I get to question you, one of the best interviewers in the world. Okay, so for our listeners who are watching in and our viewers watching in from places other than Canada, I'm with Miss Rita De Montes, who is the lifestyle and food editor at the Toronto Sun. How the hell do you end up there, Rita? I don't think in all the years that I've known you that I've actually asked you. I've seen you there. That's what you do. I've never actually asked you what made you get into it from when you were young. Tell us about that, please.
It's interesting because I've been with the Sun over 46 years now.
Wow.
And I think it's because when I was a kid, I was a voracious reader. I mean, I once tackled Charles Dickens' Great Expectations in grade 3.
Wow.
I didn't know half of what I was reading, but I felt the words were very delicious.
Right.
So, and I remember passages from that book to this day. So
I've
that
never heard
started
someone
my,
describe words as delicious. That's interesting. Words
oh,
were delicious.
absolutely.
That's it. Yeah, right.
Oh,
Okay.
a well-written passage will stay with you the rest of your life because that's a gift. So I thought one day
Sure.
I'd like to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
And that's how it happened. And just through an amazing series of coincidence, I graduated from high school on a Friday, and I went to work for TV Guide magazine in Canada on a Monday. And in
Right.
those days, that was back in 73, there was a little job posting in my high school. And I thought, TV Guide magazine? I was collecting TV Guide covers since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, so maybe the Guardian Angels realized I was graduating into unemployment and they offered me this job. And I've been in media since I was 18.
Wow. So you got that job in 1973,
Uh-huh.
was it?
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. That's 49 years ago.
Yep.
I know
My
because I was born in
media.
74.
I know.
That's how I know. Yeah.
You were just a sparkle in your parents'
Wow.
eye.
And so you went from there. Did you go straight into the Sun then, as a
No, I was
journalist?
no, I was at TV Guide for about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I quit because I was bored. I was young. I wanted to travel. You know, when
Hmm.
you grow up in a culturally sensitive family, like I'm Italian,
Yeah.
and I love my ethnicity. I'm proudly Canadian and very proud of my being Italian. But, you're sort of like sheltered. So I became a travel agent for like 4 months. It was the
Right.
worst job of my life.
Did you say
I
for a
was
month?
4 months.
Oh,
I
for
started
months.
in
Yeah.
September. 2 hours
Yeah.
into the job, I thought I made a big mistake,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I got fired in a very creative way. My dad read my job in the local Italian paper, and Rita, is this your job?
Okay.
And I'm going, oh my God, yes. And part of me was like, yes, I'm being fired, and
Oh,
part of
right.
me was brokenhearted.
That's how you found out because they were advertising to find
How
your
creative.
replacement.
I had
That's
to
pretty good,
confront
isn't
my
it?
boss, who scared the crap out of me. He was a very big, very noble Italian man who
Yeah.
patted me on the head and said, Rita, you go home, get married, have babies. Patted me on the head like I
Mm.
was a poodle, his beloved
Mm.
poodle. And I said, I got to show this man up.
Mm.
And I decided I was going to start harassing all the papers and everything. And I harassed this guy at the Sun. And he hired me because I think I just wore him down. And I
Yeah.
was
Right.
like I was the assistant national TV Guide editor at that time. And I ended up going to the Sun doing the exact same thing. It was awesome. And
Yeah.
then from
Right.
there, I grew. I grew into different departments. I covered everything from crime, lifestyle, food, travel, everything. It's been great.
Yeah. But now you're being the lifestyle and food editor, and how long have you held that residency for now?
So I've been with the Life section since mid 80s, 1986,
Yeah, yeah.
and the
So
food editor.
you would have seen some really the world change. I mean, yes, you would have interviewed some interesting people, and we will get to that a little bit later. But what? How do you just fall into that? I mean, you have to have obviously some sort of experience before they give you the the job of being the editor, because you've got to know about everything, right? Tell us a
Right.
little bit about that, because it's not every day you speak to a newspaper editor. What does that entail, and how has it changed over the years?
Oh, it's changed dramatically. So before we used to have staff and teams who did layout and came up with heads and kickers, artwork. We would
Hmm.
organize shoots and we'd hire models. Everything now is online. And I was really, Joe, when I think of my career, I was very, very blessed and lucky that I worked with the most biggest talent in journalism. And I was taught things like the mechanics of putting out a paper, doing layout, coming up with heads. I talk to people about what makes a good story, what makes a good lead. Now, I'm very quick on going and putting my stories on WordPress, getting the artwork from Getty Images, measuring it out. Or if you sent me pictures, I'd measure it out, put it online, put it in the
Yeah,
system. It's seamless now, but
yeah,
that's
right.
because of the evolution of journalism.
Yeah. And how did you end up specifically being the food editor? I mean,
I
why
kept
food?
bringing
I
in
mean,
food.
yeah, okay, but but
Seriously.
did you have any other experiences in that, or it was just because of the stories that you were doing were gravitating towards
Part of
the
that, yeah.
culinary world?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I found that, I found myself interviewing a lot of people in the food industry because lifestyle is based on a lot of the food industry. And of
yeah.
course, my mother was a professional cook. She worked with
Oh,
caterers
I
and
didn't know
everything.
that. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I was
Yeah,
exposed to the world of the restaurant industry at a young age. But at the same time, you could be interviewing a scientist, a doctor, a chef. Their stories are similar in a sense. They all have the
yeah,
same, chemistry.
yeah.
So everyone has a story to tell,
Yeah. Well, you're probably
regardless.
one of the biggest and most respected names in food, in Canada. And as a consequence, you get to interview and speak to some really big names. Tell us about some of the people that you've spoken to, sorry.
Well, yeah, I've, it's just been an incredible adventure. And one day I should put it down in paper. But people like Anthony Bourdain. I've interviewed him 9 times.
Hmm.
Jamie Oliver is a good friend of mine. I spent 3 days
Yeah.
in Tuscany with him and his team.
Yeah.
Very nice man. Nigella Lawson, Martha Stewart. I met Snoop Dogg. I met Bon Jovi. I hung out with Bon
Hang
Jovi.
on a second. What's Snoop Dogg got to do with anything here? What,
Well, Martha
how,
Stewart.
how do you go from Anthony Bourdain, Martha Stewart,
To
Nigella
Snoop
Lawson,
Dogg.
Snoop Dogg? How does that happen? Can you
I met
explain
him
that, please?
because I flew to Las Vegas to interview Martha Stewart about the opening of her new restaurant in Las
Right.
Vegas, and
Yeah.
her business associate happens to be Snoop Dogg.
Oh, right.
Very,
Okay.
yeah, tall,
And what was he
elegant
like?
man. Oh, he's got the
Really?
most beautiful skin.
Really? I just look at him and go, what do people see in this guy? I mean, apart from his music, I mean, he just, I don't know. But yeah, so he invests in Martha Stewart's business.
Oh
Am I?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 They work together. Actually, he's actually like a math genius. Like when he went to school, people weren't aware that Snoop Dogg was actually like a math wizard. His background is economics. It's like
Well, that's
Mick
fascinating.
Jagger, you know?
Yeah, right. Because the byline of this podcast obviously is called A Serious Chat with a Comedian, but it's also, the byline is tell us something that we don't know. So there's that in and of itself. You've just told us something about Snoop Dogg that we had no idea about, right?
Yes.
And so and okay, let's go back to Anthony Bourdain because he had a sad ending.
Yeah.
How long before he passed away did you interview him, and did you see any change in him over that time? Yeah, can you talk about
Yes.
that?
Absolutely. I was lucky. They flew me down to New York City to interview him. And last time I had seen him, he seemed a lot more relaxed and happy than all this things were happening in his life. And he was really working out. So he had cords. I remember his arms. He had these tattoos. And he looked tired. The thing is with Anthony Bourdain, he was an open book. He purposely
Yep.
did that because he figured they were going to be digging into his past anyway. So ask him anything, but at the same time, he's guarded, and that's okay.
Yeah.
At one point I turned to him and I said, how do you do all this? What is going on in your life? And he looked startled that I asked him, and he says, I don't know how I do it. And he looked pained, to be honest with you. And then I said to him, one of his shows featured Iggy Pop. I
Yep.
love Iggy Pop. And
Yep.
I told him about this one passage in the show that he was on, and he lit up. He says, you remember that? I said, absolutely. I thought it was quite joyful and an emotional moment between two seasoned men walking on a beach talking about how curious they are. Because Iggy Pop looked at him and said, I'm a curious man. You look like a curious man too. And
Yeah.
the fact that I remembered that seemed to have relaxed Anthony Bourdain. And I got a great interview from him. And he died this was in October, it was around Halloween. And he
Yeah.
died the following spring, which
Yeah,
broke my
right.
heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it broke a lot of people's hearts. It was
Yeah.
just really, really sad. He
Devastating.
was a really, really interesting guy, and he made watching food shows, very interesting. I mean, it was a tinge of rock star about him as well. You
He
know.
was. He was. And here's the
Yeah.
interesting thing. His second wife is Sardinian.
Oh,
I'm
right.
Sardinian.
Yes, of course.
So when he told me about marrying this girl from Sardinia, this was in
Yeah.
a previous interview. He was so relaxed and happy, and he became a dad to a little girl. And
Yeah.
I said, where in Sardinia? And he says, oh,
Yeah.
a place called Moro, which is about the size of my office at the moment. And I go, Nora, that's my people are there. I go, there's
Wow.
this obscure possibility. Perhaps you and I are related in for a whole 30 seconds in life.
Yeah.
True story.
Yeah. And was he very enigmatic as he appeared on the TV?
Yes. He was
Yeah.
very, because I interviewed him so many times, I didn't know which Anthony Bourdain would walk through the door, but I was very respectful of that. I asked him,
What do you
our
mean
first,
by that? What do you mean the which Anthony Bourdain will walk through the door? I mean, obviously you're referring to the different personalities that
well,
he
the
had?
different moods.
Right.
Like one day he was angry. Like one interview, he was sort of like short, not angry, but like pissed off at something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then another time, like my first interview with him, it was really, he strolled into the office. I had a Tim Hortons for him and a typical Canadian donut. But
Yeah.
I asked him a very difficult question. I asked him if he'd eat dog. And he was taken aback by that because he traveled to countries where eating dog is considered normal.
Right.
And he was really pained telling me he didn't know, but I suspect he had. That's just
Yeah.
my own
Right.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's asking those
It's
questions.
Yeah. But you see, this before we talk about some of the other people that you interviewed, because now we're on this sort of a path here. Um, how did you become, the interviewer that you are? Because you do have to ask those questions. So what made you ask that question as soon as you walked in? Like, why didn't you, smooth him out a little bit, ask him some easier questions, make him comfortable, and then hit him with that question? Because I know you, I mean, you've interviewed me many, many times over the years. You do have an interesting style. Well, how did that develop, in your opinion?
I think I'm just a curious person. I'm asking a
Right.
question I think a lot of people would want to ask, but also at the same time finding that happy medium, which is just like dancing on a sword in a way. You want to ask questions. You
Yeah.
have to be prepared for the response and take it from there. I've had to ask some pretty tough questions from people. I'll give you very, very quickly. In
Yeah,
my
sure.
early in my career, I used to cover a lot of crime,
Yep.
and I interviewed a woman who murdered her husband. And she came from a small town in Nova Scotia. They had made a documentary about her. My boss asked me to interview her on this book that was based on her life, and I said absolutely. She came from a small town. She was terrified. So her people called me and said she doesn't want to do the interview anymore. I said, absolutely. I'm not going to be a voyeur in someone's grief. That said, she was in town. I bought chocolate chip cookies and milk, and I warmed the cookies up in the microwave. I said to them, pop in, just put her feet up, just before her flight. We'll just have a little chat. We'll talk about anything but. And that's exactly what I did, giving her milk and cookies, which is a sense of comfort and security. So, but I knew she would talk to me.
Yeah.
So the moment I just knew, and then I got up and I said, I guess it's time for you to leave. And then she looked me straight in the eye and she says, I'm going to tell you something I haven't told anyone. And I said, and what would that be? She goes, I don't believe I killed my husband. So I'm on my way with my lawyer to the coroner's office in Toronto so I can look at pictures of him with his head blown off so that I can tell you that I actually killed my husband. See, this man brutalized her and tortured her and was so graphic what he did to her. But she took it all, except he woke up one day and said, I'm going to kill your son tomorrow. And she was convinced of it. He got the rifle out. She did it so that she could save her son's life. And this all came out in my story.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
That's
so it's a
interesting.
question of, like I said, everyone has a story to tell. And it's just, if they're going to tell it, they're going to tell it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jamie Oliver, changing subjects, he seems like a pretty fun
He's a
guy.
lovely man. Very,
Yeah.
he reminds me of you. Very
Hubbly
gracious,
bubbly, hubbly lubbly bubbly bubbly bubbly.
but actually very gracious, very kind. I saw him working with his team. He has this wonderful partner, who's the Italian gentleman, and I just found he's very. Like, I've been interviewing Jamie Oliver since 2001.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, he'll talk to me about anything, his struggles, his challenges. You know, he has severe dyslexia,
Right.
and he went and got a degree in the health sciences, so he could put his money where his mouth is and talk about good nutrition and things like that.
Yeah, because he's kind of famous for, famous for many things, but, one of the things that stood out in the last few years was he really stood up to the schools and made sure that schools have good nutrition, So that's where it starts off, in the playground and making sure in the canteens that there isn't food that is, well, making sure that food is healthy, really.
Absolutely.
Apart from one other thing. Now, do you think, in your opinion, having interviewed a lot of foodies and chefs over the time, was he the first kind of rock star celebrity TV chef of the time? That's what I remember. Was anyone before him?
There were more established chefs. They were a little older
Yeah.
and everything. He came on the scene with, remember when he was the Naked Chef?
The Naked Chef, yes.
And the Naked Chef was based on simplicity of his dishes, of his meals. He stripped down all the creams and all the sauces and presented food in all their, intimate glory. But people looked at him, and he was this young, very baby-faced with spiky hair, and
Yeah.
everybody wanted to own him. And he said, no, 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 nobody owns me but me.
Yeah.
And so when I interviewed him, he was just at that process in his life where he was taking control of everything that belonged to him. And he was young. He was in his early 20s.
Yeah,
But
right.
he was very seasoned. Like, he was trained by the best. So he knows food.
Yeah, yeah. And moving away from the people that you interviewed, no. Sorry, I want to talk about one more person that you interviewed, Stanley Tucci, because he is hot right now.
He's very hot.
He's Rita. He's very popular.
He is. He's also very hot, but very popular.
Which is interesting because when you look at him, he's a skinny guy, bald, glasses. He's not the George Clooney looking kind of guy, is he? But there's something about him, isn't there?
He has class. He has
Yeah.
he
That
has
voice, that
something,
sort of golden syrup voice that he has.
and he is very He's very refined. He's very elegant. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I flew to Montreal to interview him. I was so
Yeah.
excited,
Yeah.
but I was told I only had 8 minutes with him.
Right.
So they sent me the night before so I can contemplate what can I cram into 8 minutes.
Mm.
So I had to plot what can I say, what can I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw so they were setting up the interview. So it's not the talent; it's the people surrounding the talent that make your life a misery.
Right.
So his handlers and things like that, and I understand that they're protecting the
Mm.
source.
Mm.
So I walked in and I looked him right in the eye, and he stood up with those glasses and this beautiful suit and yellow socks with little baby blue motifs. And I said, Signor Tucci, come va la giornata?
Yeah.
And he just lit up and he goes, You're
Yeah.
Italian? I go,
Yeah.
Proudly Canadian, but yes, I'm Italian.
Yeah.
Sat down 25 minutes later, we're still blabbing up a storm. His
Yeah.
agents
That's
are
right.
freaking out.
Yeah.
He's just saying, No, tell me more, tell me more.
Yeah.
Now, you know about his challenges because he was going through cancer treatment when he was doing the first series of
Right.
Stanley Tucci Eating Italy.
Yeah.
And
No,
then
I
the
didn't know
second,
that about that. Yeah.
yeah, he had, I think it was, and please don't quote me on it, but cancer of his throat or something like that.
All right.
Yeah, but he's
Okay. I
fine
had no
now.
idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
second series, he's like eating up a storm and really enjoying the flavors and the sensations. It's quite wonderful.
Hope you're enjoying the podcast. We'll be right back straight after this ad break. Hi, this is Joe Avati, and I am very proud to say that I am now one of the brand ambassadors for Elite Supplements. One of the supplements I take every day is resveratrol, an anti-aging supplement. You know how they say that 1 glass a day of wine is good for you? It's because it's got resveratrol in it. But do you know how much wine you actually have to drink to get any benefit of it? 11 litres. Now, it doesn't take Einstein to figure out that if you're drinking 11 litres of wine a day, you ain't going to be around long enough to see any benefit. So make sure you get your supplements from Elite Supplements. Resveratrol worked for me. Look how young I look. And I'm 73. Hi everyone, I'd like to thank one of the sponsors of the podcast, St. Romeo, who provide great skincare products for men. I'm going to show you some of the products. St. Romeo Facial Cleanser, Rock and Roll Face Scrub. And if you had a rock and roll lifestyle, you're going to need a face scrub. This is their deep cleansing charcoal bar. How putting charcoal on your face cleans it, I've no idea, but it works. This is one of my favorites, the Cucumber Eye Gel. Must be for vegans. And they've got heaps of stuff for your hair too. Shampoos, styling creams, and Stronghold for your hair. Obviously, I don't need any of these. I'd like to thank St. Romeo for being one of the sponsors for the Joe Avati podcast. It is a fantastic series, and his book is great too. His book is a big seller, and he's Calabrese.
Yes.
Yeah, he's Calabrese. Yeah, I think he grew up in Westchester in New York, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken. Forgive me if I got that wrong, but that's from what I understand. Yeah, and he's just really right now. He's I think he's almost as popular for his TV show as he was for his acting.
He found the perfect niche. And I think it was people were missing Anthony Bourdain. He wasn't there to take Anthony Bourdain's place. This is Stanley Tucci, and he has a completely different approach to food. And I love when he traveled to his parents' hometown, where everything is called Tucci. I remember that; it was
Yeah,
brilliant. So
yeah.
the idea is he wanted to present food for what it is, which is a love affair. Italy has the best love affair with food.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Now, speaking of that, and speaking of the travel, what are some of the highlights that you've seen throughout your time as a journalist, traveling and talking and writing about food?
One of my favorite places is New Orleans. I fell in love with the people there. Their
Yeah, right.
voices are like molten chocolate melted over warm ice cream. It's something so
I love how you describe things, Rita. I've always loved that about you. You know,
there
when you
that
said the words were delicious, say that again. What? Can you repeat that, please? Their voices are
molten
like what?
chocolate over warm ice cream. It just melts over you. Like I remember the kindness of the people. I love New Orleans. It's dark, it's
Mm,
gritty, it's magical, dark magic, but it's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
And I love California. I have fallen in love with California over and over again.
Really, where are your favorite places to go? Because I'm
I've
doing some
actually
shows there
started
soon.
from the north, like going from San Francisco all the way down, uh, driving that famous road.
Yeah,
I remember going to Francis Ford Coppola's winery, one of them called the Rubicon.
yeah.
And in front was a huge lemon tree to which I stole about 30 leaves, tucked them away because lemon trees, as you know, you take the leaves and you tear them open and you inhale pure lemon essence. Can't do it with orange trees. But
Yeah,
I
right.
took them
No, I
from,
didn't know that. I didn't know that actually, Rita.
you have lemon trees.
Yes, of course we do. We do have
Then
lemon
you
trees.
go and
Yeah.
grab a bunch of leaves and
I
tear
will.
them open and inhale.
Yeah, right. Okay, I
And
will do
so
that.
that was exciting. But then I remember we were going to some restaurant on a mountaintop, and the chef was so zen. His approach to food was so humble and nurturing. And I remember he made something. We're talking about 15 years ago. I remember this. He made a mushroom Wellington. It's like this big, beefy, juicy mushroom wrapped in whatever it was. But halfway through the meal, because I wanted two of those mushroom Wellingtons. He came up to us. It was a group of journalists, and he says, "Come, quickly, come." And I thought, "What's going on? Is there a fire?" You know? And he took us outside, and he says, "Look at the sky." And I've never seen a pure sky where the stars looked like they were going to touch us. It was the greatest gift anyone could give me. It was beautiful.
No,
Yeah. So I
no.
remember that. I've been to oh, I love LA. I love West Hollywood. West Hollywood is hilarious. We were
It's a
there for
great place, isn't
Halloween.
it?
It's
Yeah,
a
I just
mad
spent a week
place.
there. Yeah, not long ago. I did some shows in San Jose and Los Angeles. And Natalie and little Antonio and I we hung out most of the time in West Hollywood. It's fantastic, isn't it?
It's an amazing place. I was there for Halloween,
Yeah.
and they took us to the famous West Hollywood Halloween party, which is, we got in because we were lucky. And I was taking pictures. This is when everyone had cameras instead of their phones. And so we used film.
Yeah.
And I remember getting back to the office, and they would develop the film, and then you'd get one of these big rings and you pick the pictures. And I said to them, "You must take this picture of this group of people who were dancing in front of me because they were all, wearing tight cat outfits, and they had the most beautiful bodies, and they were just posing and everything." And then they called me over and said, "Rita, we can't run this picture." I said, "Why not?" Because they're naked. Their bodies were painted.
All
And in the
right.
picture, you can see right through everything.
Yeah.
In
Right.
the dark,
Okay.
on that moment, I didn't see all. I just saw a bunch of
Yeah.
cats. What an
Okay.
experience. I remember that.
Yeah.
So I love New Orleans. I loved, I spent a night in Louisville, Kentucky, and I spent a night in a haunted sanatorium, which was amazing. It was full of ghosts. I can guarantee you I saw a lot of weird things there.
But what were you doing there? Why did you spend a
Oh,
night there?
there was a show on TV, and they invited talking about the most haunted places in the U.S. And so
Hmm.
they invited a group of journalists to try it, and of course, I said yes because I'm stupid, you know, a rosary pressed into my hand, of course. And here's the weird thing: I bought a tape recorder, folks. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's a little device. Anyways, I had never used it the tape recorder, and I took it to the. So this sanatorium was interesting. It used to be tuberculosis sanatorium, and it looked really strange. It was in the shape of like an owl, and it had balconies, so people who were sick, they'd get fresh air. But it
Right.
had 6 levels, and I left my tape recorder on the first level, And I left it there for a couple of hours. And then when we were
We're
leaving,
just
I
like
took it.
in the foyer. Where did you
Yeah,
leave
in
it?
one of the rooms, tucked in a. It was
Oh,
near the
right.
morgue because they had a morgue. It was
Okay.
all empty. I mean, it was abandoned and everything. But we went on
Yeah.
this
Right.
tour,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I picked up the, where I left the tape recorder, and I took it home because we just flew in and flew out. So I was
Yeah.
24 hours. I was really tired. I came home, took a shower, and while I was drying off, I listened to the tape recorder. Literally, within moments, I hear little footsteps going downstairs, and I heard someone pick up my tape recorder, which was tucked away in the dark, and breathe into it. And put it down. I dropped that tape recorder like it was something hot in my hand. I took it to the office. I had people listen to it and they freaked out. I put it in my story.
So, but hang on a sec. But I'm a bit confused. Was it recording? What did someone? If
Oh, I kept it
what
on
was it on?
recording. It was recording
Why would you keep it on record?
because I
Just
was curious to see if I heard anything, like if I heard
oh right,
footsteps,
okay. Out
if
of
I heard
curiosity,
anything.
you kept it in there. You pressed record and left
Yep.
it in there on purpose and to see.
Uh-huh.
Right. Okay. Now that makes sense. Right. Okay.
Yeah, and then it's something really strange happened, and kind of creeped me out, to be honest with you. But it was a good story to write.
Yeah.
I spent a
Yeah.
night in a haunted sanatorium. Who does that?
Yeah. That's true. Only you would do that. Yeah. And actually write about it and enjoy it and laugh about it years later. What about some of the nightmare interviews that you've had? Anything you can tell us about there?
Well, I was
I mean, you've
chased off
interviewed
the
a lot of people.
property.
Come on, let's call a spade here. You've interviewed thousands of people over the time. Surely there would have been somebody who really ticked you off, or just wasn't into it, or just
Yeah,
just
there,
was not pleasant to deal with.
no, there was. Yeah, I've had a lot of incidents. Of course, I remember I interviewed a woman who she headed up some organization to do with breast cancer. She really made a career of it. And I casually asked her, I said, well, what kind of breast cancer did you have? Because she was really
Mm,
involved, and she goes, well, I didn't quite have it. I had a biopsy.
mm,
And I said, okay, so let me get this straight. You're spearheading this and you're assembling a lot of scared, broken women to talk about their experiences and this and that. And this is like your third, fourth, fifth year doing this. Why can't you heal from what biopsy you went through? You didn't really have cancer. Well, she was outraged with me. She called me insensitive. And how would I know what she went through? And she got up mid and left. So I didn't get a
mm,
chance to tell her that I too went through a breast cancer scare, and I too had a biopsy to which they thought it was positive, and I too survived and moved on.
mm,
So I found that because I found she was exploiting other women's vulnerabilities. I
mm,
didn't, my job is to report, not to
mm,
write a column on it, but I did ask her, like, why are you not moving forward with this? You didn't have breast cancer.
mm.
So I thought there was something a little bit more deep and needy about it. So that's fine. You can walk away. It's not my problem.
We had an incident like that in Australia where there was
Oh,
a
yeah.
lady who pretended that she had some sort of I'm sure it was cancer, or some sort of an issue to extract money from people, and they found her out. Now, so going further there, now that we're starting to go down that line, and with the with the introduction, in the last few years of online media and online trolling, have you
Yeah.
found that you're getting a lot more backlash with some of your stories, even though they may be stories that not really sort of you're not sort of really lifting the dirt on anyone. You're just
Yeah.
discussing about a particular restaurant or a particular food or a particular place you've seen. Do you get that a lot?
Yeah. And Joe, I could write about marshmallows and I'll be attacked. I
Why? Why
cannot.
do you think that is?
I think social media has created this whole new audience of cruelty and bullying. behind hidden behind the anonymity of the person because they don't have the they don't have the courage to come out and put their name on things. Like I I started reading some stuff about me and I thought, this is sick. And it was
Mm,
upsetting me and I thought I'm not going to let anything upset me.
mm,
It's just I'm absolutely gobsmacked and appalled by what people allow. Like it's the wild wild west of the world wide web, as I call it, and everyone's entitled to an opinion, of course. We live in a democracy, but that doesn't excuse that just the lack of compassion out there.
mm.
I'm just absolutely gobsmacked by what I read sometimes. So I don't read
Yeah.
it. It's not worth it.
Yeah. So and because this is the interesting thing, back in the day, and when you would write something that might have been a little bit contentious, for example, where would the backlash have come? Would you have received hate mail, like in the mail? Would you have received phone calls? I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
it
Phone
still
calls,
happened, but
mail,
not as much, right?
exactly. Yeah. So I would get mail or letters to the editor,
Mm-hmm.
but it's true. I mean, what I write about is basically it's not like I don't write about politics. I have my own political views. I keep to myself. And I just feel that I'm in a position, of trust, and I don't want to betray that
Mm-hmm.
trust to anybody. But that
Yeah.
said, I'm just like I'd like to. I had one guy. I used a picture on one of my stories to talk about couch potatoes.
Right.
It's a medical issue. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
gain weight, blah, blah, blah. And I found this hilarious picture of a guy on the couch with a big bowl of typical,
Yeah.
popcorn, whatever, eating. Well,
Yeah.
this man went crazy on me. He sent me 22, 23 emails, and he reduced to calling me the most outrageous, sexist, racist names. Like, really? Really? I wanted to email
Mm.
him and say, "Is that you on the couch? Maybe that I've hit a
Mm.
nerve." But I wouldn't
Yeah.
I wouldn't respond because you don't want to get into a pissing match with a porcupine, as they say.
Yeah. Fair enough.
That's a good
Now,
one.
I wanted to, yeah, here's a good one. I wanted to ask you about the changes in Canada that you've seen in terms of the food landscape. As you know, I'm a massive foodie. I always love coming there and eating. What are the biggest changes that you've noticed over the years in Canada in regards to food?
Michelin Michelin is now in Canada.
Yeah,
They
where?
ju- so they've introduced it to Toronto. Toronto was
Mm-hmm.
the that's where it started. So I can't off the top of my head. I know that Alo has received 1-star Michelin. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have the names of the other restaurants, but this is a
Mm.
big deal.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, I talked to people in the industry, and they said we don't need Michelin to prove our worth. So, like, does Australia have Michelin?
No,
Yes,
we
right?
don't have Michelin. I was going to say that,
Oh,
and we have some of the best restaurants that I've ever eaten. Now, I eat all over the world, and I go out of my way to eat. I'll go on eating tours, or we're doing shows where we are doing reporting on on San Sebastian, for example, or in Barcelona or in Paris. So I know my food, and I will research and go to eat at some of the best places in the world. And I have to say, there are some restaurants here in Australia which compete, and they're up there with some of the greatest restaurants in the world. And I've eaten at Michelin star restaurants, which you know, they just don't compare. There are some
yeah.
restaurants here in Australia which are much better than Michelin restaurants that I've eaten in France, for example. And so I wonder why that is. And I don't know if it's a distance thing. They don't want to come here and do it because there's all these regulations. You must have the tables have to be certain distance apart and so on and so forth. But then you go to Singapore, for example, and you'll go in some market, some noodle, and there'll be some Michelin star noodles. And you go, well, how the hell is this possibly Michelin star chicken?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
okay.
It's insane.
it's
There's
not
an
real.
amazing
Yeah.
book. Since I know you're a great foodie, and you have you have a degree in food sciences. You're an ice
Yeah,
cream scientist. Yeah, I remember that.
yeah,
There is an amazing book called The 100-Foot Journey, written by New
right.
York. Forgot the name of the author, but all I know is I read the book and I cried, and I reread it, and then I found the author and I said, "May I please interview you because this book is so profound." They made a movie about it. The movie
Right,
sucked. I'm sorry.
right, yeah,
Didn't like it at all. But the book explains the history behind things like the Michelin star and how some chefs, there was a famous French chef, they took away one of his stars and he committed suicide.
wow,
So if you
yeah.
must find a good book on the food industry, please find this book, A 100-Foot Journey. It's fabulous, just fabulous.
And who's the author? Do you
I
remember?
don't have it here, but I promise I'll send it to you.
Okay, all right, that's great. Well, people will look it up. We'll put it in the links in the bio. And so, what other things have changed? What are your favourite places to eat in and around Canada? Is there
It,
anywhere you know? I mean, apart from the major, you got your Torontos and Montreals, and I love steak in Calgary and stuff like that. Seafood over in Vancouver.
yeah.
Um, what other areas of Canada should we know about for the produce? From what
Southern
you have
Ontario.
found. Yeah.
Southern Ontario is like a breadbasket. I mean, even our wine industry there, if you were to look at the world, it's on the same circumference as France. And so we
Right.
have award-winning wines. Of course, we started the whole ice wine industry,
Yes.
and it's phenomenal. There's a restaurant in Waterloo, Ontario, Southern Ontario, and it's called Langdon Hall. And the chef there is Jason Bangarter. The food is amazing. I'll send you a link to it.
Yeah,
Just
please.
this is a real farm to table. I mean, I love that they go in their gardens and they pick things. I think that's a really strong movement. Niagara on the Lake, of course, you're familiar with. The
Yes.
food there is amazing. I just love that whole connection with Mother Nature. Another big food trend is nothing goes to waste.
Yep.
So there's a real push for like the ugly foods they're called, like ugly fruit, ugly vegetables. Why are they being like one of the biggest areas of concern is food waste. Like it's frightening how much
Yeah.
that in part of the world people are so starving and they're dying, and the other part we're throwing away individually like a couple of tons of food a year because we don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, exactly right. Or it's not perfect. It's not round. It's discolored. Has a little bit of mold on it, and so on and so forth. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting.
And we're
Now,
learning
how
about the
does
best before dates.
well? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And look, sometimes you don't have to really consume a food within that. It's a bit of a guide. It depends on what it is.
Yeah.
If you're looking at things like perishables, like milk and meats, well, you can when a meat's off, you can just see, you can smell it, obviously, but you can also see that green tinge on the surface, which is nitrogen forming. Right, because
Okay.
that's the color of nitrogen when it forms is green, and that's what you're seeing because obviously the bacteria is breaking down the proteins, and the byproduct is nitrogen, and that's why you see that little green
Wow.
film on top of meat there. Um, Now, I wanted to talk to you about we talked about how things have changed in Canada in terms of food, but how is social media and influencers and so on changed journalism?
Where do I start? You got a couple of days.
Well, yeah, I do have a couple of days for you, but let's get to the crux of it. Really, I mean, is like if I'm going to read a story and you have written it, right? You've got a lot of clout. I'm going to read something that you've written. I know Rita and what she says, and she's done the research, and she's been here for many, many years, and she's been the editor for a long time. So I know that what I'm going to get is going to be good reading, and it's going to, it's going to be credible. Is that being demined? Yeah.
I think so. I mean, there's we all have to embrace the new changes in the evolution of delivering the messaging because that's what it boils down to. And when you do that, of course, there's going to be room for error. So there are very respected food bloggers and influencers, but at the same time, I've talked to people in restaurants who are being abused by people who phone and say, "Oh, I'd like a free meal for me and a friend, and I'll write it up, and my 30,000 followers or whatever." And if that restaurant says no, that person will set out and destroy them. And I was reading online one restaurant where there was a party. They had just opened up everything because post pandemic, and they were trying to accommodate them. They gave them free drinks. They comped them the meal, and yet while they're sitting there, they're dissing the restaurant on social media. So the
Wow.
owner fought back and said, and he posted everything. So it's like an online war. So then you don't know who to trust anymore. People are being paid for their opinion. People buy influencers. Influencers buy clicks and things like that. So what's real? Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
write about, I write a column on where to go shopping. Part of it is to let people know where to get stuff cheap and good, and part of it is to help people who are struggling. And one company I wrote about, and it's in my column. I do not get paid by anyone except my company. He's telling me this too, and I'm like of two minds, going, okay, I'm happy for you. He hired a 22-year-old influencer with apparently 500,000 followers. She walked into his place. She said, "Leave me alone. Let me do my stuff." And literally the next day, he was inundated with 20 somethings buying up everything she held up. So how do you compete with that?
Yeah.
You know, we're in interesting times. I think
Yeah.
it's a new revolution. It's like the industrial revolution, if you want to call it that. But it's the messaging revolution.
Yeah. Well, because you're kind of journalism, the journalist you are, you're a legacy journalist, right?
Interesting.
Explain that.
Yeah.
Yeah, explain that concept to us, please.
I
Yeah.
guess you could say we're just the traditional journalists. We're the gum. Like I used to tell people, a real journalist, you'd cut them and they'd bleed ink. Now you tell that
Yeah.
to someone, they wouldn't know what the heck you're talking about
Yeah.
because
They
the
bleed
ink from
likes
them.
now. They bleed likes.
Yeah, they bleed
Yeah.
inks exactly. So part of it
Yeah.
is you have to keep with the program if you want to stay with what you love. And
Sure.
part of it is like, why should I have to adjust I mean, at the end of the day, I want to deliver a good message. I want to deliver a good story. I want to tell people about this story. And so far, it's working out, but it's getting more challenging.
And this is really interesting to ask you this question because you're going through what you're going through with Mario. Every time I see you bubbly, you're always doing something, you're always interviewing someone interesting, going to different places. You've got a lot going on in your life and you manage to hold it all together. So what do you do every day to be able to get up out of bed and keep on doing that? What do you do every day to keep living your best life?
Well, I've learned it's okay to drop the F bomb at least a dozen times in the morning when I get up. I'm not, people say, "Why are you so joyful?" Well, I have always been a joyful person. I've always seen
Yeah,
the light. I'm very positive, and
yeah,
I'm the first to jump up and help and everything. But I'm not a saint. I get angry. I get frustrated. I cry. I mean, who doesn't cry
yeah.
over, seeing we don't have kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's I have wonderful support from my family, but they can only do so much too. I can't ask them to drop everything and run over because I'm in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah,
So I remember, I'll tell you, Joe, I was in the middle of the pandemic, gloved, mask, going crazy, and I wanted to go shopping. So I went to a local Winners, and I bumped into this woman with my cart, and she was masked, and she looked at me, and I laughed, and I said, "Oh, I feel like I'm on the highway here, bumping into people," and
yeah.
she started to cry. And
Mm,
I said, "Are you okay?" And she goes, "I haven't been out. I haven't seen anyone." And then she looked at me and she goes, "I just miss hugging people."
mm,
So I put my arms out and I said, "Come
mm,
here." I gave
mm.
her a big hug. And we laughed. And I made her laugh. And I said, "Look, I'm here Tuesday mornings, Thursday afternoons." And Then she started crying, and I go, I understand. You know, touch is love. You're not alone in this. Neither am I. And this too shall pass. And I went on my way, and I don't think she realized she gave me a bigger gift than I could ever give her with my hugs.
Yeah. Well, that sums you up, Rita. Look, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. You may be short in stature, but you've got a big heart. You're a big personality, and you've been an absolutely big influence in my life ever since I've been coming to Canada in 2001. And it's so great to be able to turn the tables and interview you and find out a little bit more about you. And I'm sure that, our viewers and our listeners have learnt a few little things, even if it was that Snoop Dogg is a mathematical genius.
Joe, it's been a real pleasure. You know, I met you, and instantly I felt an amazing connection because you yourself are one of the kindest people I know with the biggest heart. And one day you will have to tell them the panettone story because we met over like 3
That's
dozen
right.
panettones spilling out of my
Yeah,
car.
that's right. That's right.
But
In
you are a
Brampton.
gift, my friend.
Yeah.
You are.
Thank you very much, Rita. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that. Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you. Take care.